Welcome aboard Skylark Outdoors here, and today we're going to take you on a tour of the SACS Strider 900 or the SACS Strider 900 review. So as we step on, you can see there's actually a cooler right there. You've got your helm, it's set up like a race seat, and then up here you've got a cushion in the front as well as you have a cushion in front of the head, and that's going to fold away and open up, and there's actually a head underneath this cushion right here that you can step into. So you've got plenty of space there for both the head, and then one or two people could sit there depending. So you can see it's actually nice and deep for this size boat. You wouldn't expect it, and they've got the spare cushion in there because it's at a boat show right now. But I do love that they've got some rails on the forward component of this boat, and the Strider 900. I also did a video on the Strider 11, so check that out in the links below. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and give us that thumbs up. But the Strider 900 is just under 30 feet at 29.63 feet. It's got a 10.5 foot beam, and it has a 16-person capacity. So it's actually a fairly large capacity for this size boat. And you can see this one is outfitted with twin Mercury engines. You can have up to 500 horsepower on this, and you do have a little swim platform there in the back, as well as you've got this kind of layout platform here, and then you've got a grill and ice box and cooler right there, and then you can see this very racing inspired design at the helm. You've got your dual throttles, all of your gauges, your GPS, navigation, whatever you want there, and then a little bit of a T-top and hard top over here. So you've got a nice little bit of shade for the driver and maybe a few of the passengers in the rear, and then you've got a place to put your feet right there, as well as some storage at the helm, and you've got a windscreen. Now this boat I think would make great it'd be great use for like a yacht tender on a larger boat, as well as maybe like a sport boat or a club boat. So if you just want to get somewhere fast, you want to get somewhere easily, or you're pulling up to a lot of other boats, that's where a boat with the inner tubes really excels. You can pull up to another boat without needing to put fenders out. You're not going to scuff that boat up. Nice soft landing. So that's why a lot of ribs, rigid inflatable boats, which is what this is, that's why a lot of ribs end up being yacht tenders or something that you're going to pull up to a lot of other boats on. So let's say maybe you had a racing club, a sailing racing club. This thing is great because you can fit 16 people on it, drop people off at multiple boats, and it does have a fairly large tube at 1.97 feet in diameter. 16-person capacity. You've got 500 horsepower max, and then you've got 2.79 feet of draft, and then a 106 gallon fuel capacity. You've got a 21 gallon water capacity, and then 11 gallon waste capacity, and a 21 degree dead rise. Combine that with a 44 knot top speed, which is fast for a boat, and then you can see this sits nicely on a trailer, so easy to tow. And that's another advantage of the ribs, is that they're a lighter weight boat, which means they're going to be easier to tow and typically more fuel efficient in most cases, as well as you're going to be able to pull up to other boats to them very easily without having to put fenders out. You've got the 21 degree dead rise and 44 knots top speed. It's got a cruise speed of 28 knots, and then that fuel consumption is 15 liters per hour in cruise. And sorry it's in liters per hour, but these are European designed boats, so a lot of the stats come in metric measurements rather than imperial units. You can see there's a ladder back here in the back, and the swim platform is actually fairly generous for this size boat because it kind of wraps around, so you could definitely jump off that or easily get on and off there or walk around. Another feature of that is because that swim platform extends so far to the rear, when you back this up to a dock, you're going to have easy access to get on and off this from the rear of the dock if you've backed into a slip. Now, another thing that I like about ribs and this boat in general is that you've got that 1.97 foot diameter tube around the outside, which is going to suck up some of the bounciness and absorb some of the shock when you're riding this, but it also tends to give you a drier ride because it's going to displace more water out to the sides, just with the hull shape and the rigid inflatable tube around the outside. Now, there is plenty of seating on this for this size vessel, and you are getting a larger, longer vessel at a lower weight than you would typically get with a rib, because instead of having fiberglass all the way up, you have the rigid inflatable tube on the outside that is going to be lighter than traditional fiberglass, but it will still provide flotation and water displacement. Now, one question I commonly get about rib boats is, will they puncture or pop? These things are made to be durable, and I've seen them run into the sides of boats at fairly high speeds with wakes, waves, and everything else, and the tubes have sustained that without any issue. As well as I've seen them scrape up against the bolts sticking out of a dock or a sharper dock, and typically have not seen issues there because they are a rigid inflatable, so they kind of just bounce off of things rather than allowing the geometry of something to puncture them. However, if you do get a puncture, the boat will still float, and you can get that repaired by many people who will service rigid inflatable boats, and or you could get the entire tube replaced, which eventually does happen over time just because of UV exposure and the elements in salt exposure, but that's typically very far down the road. And if you're using this for a particular use case, like you want to use it as a tender and you want to be up against yachts, or you want something that is going to be faster and lighter and easier to tow, then those probably outweigh the design limitations of a rib boat. It is great that they are lighter, faster, displace water better, and you don't have the penalty of additional fiberglass, and you look at that over time with fuel consumption and the use case, this may be the right choice for you. But there are cases that if one of these gets punctured, you can potentially repair it. They have people that will use the appropriate methodologies to repair it and or replace it if you were to have an issue with the tube. And one thing that I like to think about this when you are looking at rigid inflatable boats is you'll often find many DNR, wildlife agencies, Coast Guard agencies, local state police use boats very similar to this, not a SACS Strider 900, but similar rigid inflatables because of their ease of trailering and the ability for them to pull right up to other boats so that they can board them without causing any kind of damage or putting fenders out. So you'll find these with a lot of agencies. Governmental agencies will use something like this because of the lighter weight, the stability, and the ability to be able to pull right up next to other boats. And those go through pretty rough conditions a lot of times where they aren't maintained maybe to the same standards as personal vessels, just because of the use and abuse and the amount of time they spend on the water versus a personal vessel, which probably gets maybe 10% of the use as a vessel that is in the water as a working vessel day in, day out. And I've seen a lot of these rigid inflatable tubes on towboats as well, like Towboat US. They'll use these as well because of the ease of being able to lash right up to a boat without fenders and then tow that boat in, or whatever they need to do if they need to get alongside and put a pump on. So those are one of the harshest use cases because people doing towing are typically out there every day in whatever weather conditions, as well as whatever conditions the vessel they're pulling up to are in, with all kinds of damage that may have been sustained during an accident, and they still use these and are using them a lot of times 365 days a year on the water. For 8 to 10 hour days, maybe even longer if they've got a later in the day captain or shift. So thanks for watching this review of the SACS Strider 900. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.